Samsung is a household name known for its high-quality electronic products and innovations. But there is a dark side to the company that many people may not be aware of. From the exploitation of young workers in Indonesia to violations of labor laws and underpayment of wages in India, physical and verbal abuse of workers, and allegations of child labor, Samsung, the South Korean multinational conglomerate, has a long and storied history. In 1938, Lee Byung-chul started a trading company dealing in everyday groceries like fruits, vegetables, and other goods. No one ever thought that Samsung would rise to become what we know today. He chose the name Samsung, which is a combination of the Korean word Sam and Sung, which together mean 3 stars. The name was chosen to represent a dream for the company's strong and everlasting brand future. He was right. In the 1950s and 60s, the company diversified into textiles and construction, and by the 1970s, it had entered the electronics market with the production of black and white televisions. During the Korean War, Lee pivoted the company towards the production of everyday products and food, and it eventually became the nation's 4th largest borrower. Ever since then, the company kept growing into an unstoppable giant. Samsung has a wide range of products and services. Most of us may only know Samsung for its electrical gadgets and home appliances, but Samsung is way bigger than you can imagine. This includes electronics, finance, media, construction, insurance, and lots more. But under all these lie some dark truths. First, to become big, the fact is that the government of South Korea itself wanted it to be exactly that way. How? In the years following the war in Korea, Samsung acquired several other companies and became the most powerful conglomerate in South Korea, with a net worth estimated to represent 19% of all South Korean wealth. The South Korean government played a significant role in helping Samsung become the successful global company it is today. In the aftermath of the Korean War, the government implemented policies and provided financial support to Samsung and other large Korean businesses in order to stimulate economic growth and development. This included offering favorable loans and tax breaks, protecting these businesses from competition and promoting their products abroad. The government's support of Samsung often came at the expense of smaller Korean businesses, and the country's economy is now overly reliant on the success of a single company, all thanks to the close personal relationship that Lee Byung-chul has formed with government officials, including the president. If this was happening in an African country, it would automatically be called corruption. But no, it's South Korea after all. But when its former vice chairman was sentenced to jail in 2017, it finally came out that Samsung has been involved in corruption. I'll come back to this later in the video. You see, Samsung relies heavily on cobalt, which is a key component of lithium-ion batteries, to power its mobile phones and other communication devices. Unfortunately, the sourcing of cobalt is linked to human rights violations and other ethical issues. It's no secret that Samsung has faced criticism over its sourcing of cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where reports have shown artisanal cobalt mines to be exploiting child labor and subjecting workers to dangerous conditions. As a key element in the lithium-ion batteries used in Samsung's electronics, cobalt is essential to the company's operations. In 2016, Amnesty International published a report alleging that cobalt mined by children and adults working in hazardous conditions was ending up in the supply chains of major electronics companies, including Samsung. In 2019, a report from China Labor Watch found that workers at a Samsung supplier in China were being subjected to excessive overtime, low wages, and dangerous working conditions. In 2020, Greenpeace accused Samsung of failing to properly address environmental and social issues in its supply chain, including the use of hazardous chemicals and the destruction of natural habitats. If you only think it's only in Africa that Samsung is doing all these evil things, you're wrong. It's not too surprising to hear about the widespread labor abuses at Samsung production sites in Asia. From the exploitation of young workers in Indonesia to the violations of labor laws and underpayment of wages in India to the forced overtime and lack of safety measures in China, it's clear that the Korean conglomerate has a lot of work to do to improve its labor practices. In Indonesia, workers as young as their late teens are often employed on a non-contractual basis, making them easy to exploit and replace when they reach their early 20s. This is made possible by the abundance of cheap labor available in the country country, with many young people desperate for work. In 2017, a report from the NGO Electronics Watch found that Samsung was not adequately addressing labor rights abuses at its suppliers in Indonesia, including the use of child labor and the exploitation of migrant workers. Those who are lucky enough to be hired on short-term contracts are often only kept on long enough to cover peak production periods, allowing Samsung to avoid paying annual bonuses. In India, Samsung is taking advantage of the apprenticeship system by hiring probationary workers for on-the-job training, only to treat them as ordinary workers and subject them to verbal abuse and threats of dismissal if they fail to meet production quotas. Probationary workers are not supposed to be given such quotas, and their monthly salaries are significantly lower than those of regular workers. Instead of hiring these workers on a permanent basis, Samsung simply changes the category of their work and rehires them on the same terms. In China, Samsung factories are notorious for their forced overtime, with employees often working over 100 hours per month just to make ends meet. Wages are low and there's little compliance with safety measures. According to China Labor Watch, employees are not allowed to sit during shifts and may be subject to physical and verbal abuse. There have also been long-standing allegations of child labor at Samsung's Chinese production sites, with the company claiming that fake IDs were to blame. However, it seems that the correct hiring and supervision procedures were not in place, allowing such abuses to occur. In 2012, a report by the non-profit organization China Labor Watch found that workers at a Samsung factory in China were subjected to long working hours, low wages, and harsh punishment for failing to meet production targets. In 2013, the organization released another report detailing similar labor rights abuses at another Samsung factory in China. In addition to labor rights abuses, Samsung has also been criticized for its environmental practices. The company has been accused of polluting the air and water in the areas surrounding its factories, causing serious health problems for local residents. In 2010, Samsung was forced to pay $200 million in damages to the South Korean government after being found guilty of dumping toxic chemicals into the ocean. Samsung and its executives have faced legal challenges and accusations of corruption and unethical business practices in the past. In 2017, Samsung's vice chairman Lee Jae-yong was sentenced to 5 years in prison for his role in a corruption scandal that involved bribing government officials in South Korea. In 2018, the company was fined $5.7 billion for violating US sanctions against Iran by exporting products to the country. It all makes you cringe sometimes when you hear all these things, because also in 2014, Samsung was accused of bribing officials in India to win a contract to supply equipment for a power plant in the state of Tamil Nadu. The company was later cleared of any wrongdoing by Indian authorities. Another Samsung executive was arrested in Poland in 2016 on charges of bribing officials in connection with the sale of a chemical plant. Overall, the dark side of Samsung is a reminder that even successful and well-known companies can have serious problems and controversies. It's important for consumers to be aware of these issues and hold companies accountable for their actions. In South Korea, Samsung is a powerful conglomerate that has played a significant role in the country's economic growth. However, some people in South Korea, particularly younger generations, are increasingly criticizing the company for cronyism and corruption. There's growing public dissent towards Samsung, and there's a question of whether the company's complicated ownership structure and the tenuous power balance between it and the country can be sustained. Some people are concerned that the company's power may be a threat to the nation's sovereignty, while others believe that the government relies too heavily on Samsung and may not be able to survive without it. There is a complex and potentially unstable relationship between Samsung and South Korea. Let me know what you think of this. Should companies be so powerful that even governments are afraid of them? Also, make sure you click the like button and don't forget to subscribe and turn the notification bell on so as not to miss my next videos.